again. Today we'll be talking about the Utopias in the X-Men world.
In many ways, the X-Men universe is a perfect example of why utopian desires arise. In the X-Men world, normal humans are forced to coexist with mutant humans. As we see with Cerebro, the number of mutants is not a small number. What makes the situation interesting is the manner in which the various humans and various mutants try to solve this situation that they're placed in.
As we touched on earlier, every individual has a different idea of what constitutes as a utopia. Several different characters display utopian visions that contrast and sometimes conflict with each other.
The mutants from Days of Future Past face an especially unique situation. At the start of the movie, we see a world in which the mutants are hunted by Sentinel robots. Ultimately, the overwhelming strength of the robots causes Xavier to send Wolverine back in time to stop a murder that ultimately led to the Sentinel program being started.
While in the past, Wolverine is tasked to unite mutants, such as Eric, Xavier, etc., in an attempt to rewrite the past. This is difficult because, as stated, each character has different motives and utopian desires. Although Wolverine does not completely rewire every character's intent, he ultimately manages to unite everyone long enough to rewrite the future. There's obviously a lot of conflict between mutants and humans in this movie. In many ways, both sides fear one another. But interestingly, there's also conflict amongst what various human characters want in terms of utopian desire, and what various mutant characters want. As seen in First Class, when Charles first exposes his and Raven's powers to the government officials, they're terrified and immediately want them locked up for being threats. Contrastly, the man who takes the group in is fascinated by their powers and wants to help them. Attitudes vary greatly in regards to their powers, along with the responses and actions against them.
One of the main characters in the film, Eric, or also called Magneto, attempts to create his own world in which mutants are more powerful than humans. In the movies, we see Eric attempt on multiple occasions to improve the mutant condition, oftentimes disregarding what humans would think would be beneficial. He states, one day I'll answer for my offenses, but not today. Only my actions, what I do in the name of all mutants, have any real meaning. Eric's resentment for humans dates back to when he was a child and placed in concentration camps along with his family. When Nazis separate Eric from his family, his power to bend metal manifests. This compels Shaw, a Nazi scientist, to experiment and ultimately torture Eric. From a young age, Eric sees the ugliness of human nature. He sees Nazis attempt to suppress many human demographics in concentration camps, and also the callousness in which they treat the people there and those who are detained.
Eric says something along the lines of, I've seen it before, first they identify you, then they round you up, and then they experiment you and detain you. In First Class, when he's talking to Charles about the mutant identification, he's voicing his concerns of a possible repeat of the treatment he faced in his past. Whether valid or invalid, his experience leads him to believe that there can be no resolution with regards to differences amongst humans. This leads Eric to actively seek a utopian future in which humans and mutants do not coexist, but rather live separately. In this future, mutants reign as superior, whereas humans become irrelevant.
Exactly, which is why in our next section and our next episode, we're going to be talking about why human characters are often viewed as villains.
And I'll be switching out with Abby so she can tackle that.
Welcome to the show, Abby.
Hi Tyler, how are you doing?
Good. So each of the movies starts in a world in which humans and mutants live somewhat peacefully, either because humans have yet to acknowledge them or because of some other thing that has created a level of acceptance between the two races.
Right, and then the movies actually start. Someone on the human side often attempts to solve the problems of the human-mutant tensions. This has been seen with the mutant registration and identification, the cures, or even in the Sentinel program. As allies of the X-Men, we see these actions as bad. but they are a common reaction for humanity, which strives to a perfect world and fights as long as possible for domineering. Mutants pose a problem to humans because they threaten humans' ideas that they are the pinnacle of evolution and the domineers of the world. Mutants, like any problem humanity faces, must be solved.
Right. So in essence, the utopian dreams of humans in the X-Men universe is to remain the same. Previous to the mutants, humans were in a state of evolutionary perfection, a world in which of dominance. In this regards, they felt as if they were in a utopia because they had reached their goal of being able to, not have any threat to their species.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why when you have an utopia, any change is really bad. So when the mutants appear on the scene, humanity has to destroy them. It's logical to maintain that utopia. It is never an option that humanity could fully accept them into that utopia because that utopia is already perfect. Any change for the better, aka accepting those mutants, would prove the fallibility of their utopia. For humans, the registrations, the cures, the killing them with the Sentinel program, all of that is a reasonable threat because even though each individual mutant with each individual power likely poses no threat to each person, as they exist as a group, mutants are threatening to humanity.
Right. What do you say to people who refuse to accept the fight between the X-Men, or not the X-Men, but the mutants and the humans, and maybe even don't even acknowledge the interpretation of humans and the X-Men?
Okay, well, it's actually pretty simple. People won't acknowledge that because they refuse to even think about it. As an audience, we ignore the role of the humans in the X-Men universe, preferring to focus on the fighting between the mutants, the X-Men, and Magneto's Brotherhood. This could be because if we look too closely at ourselves and how in each movie humans are the catalyst for the fighting, we could see that humans have a capacity for ruthless destruction. That level of self-reflection on the nature of humanity and its drive for a perfect world is too difficult for many people. And that is why, as an audience, we focus so heavily on the mutants. And honestly, directors probably know that. So that as the directors, the movie focuses on the X-Men, on the fighting, on the fantastic powers, because that way the audience has a way to distance themselves from the villainy of humanity.
Well, that's pretty interesting. And on that note, we'll have Charlotte switch in.
Yeah,
thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back, Charlotte.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to tackle Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. So he acts as the middle ground between the extremes, such as Magneto and the human villain in the movie. Charles is representative of the gray area because of instead of asserting dominance, or instead of being completely submissive, he fights for the inclusion of mutants in the world.
Right, so while we have Eric on one hand, who pushes for his own utopian future in which mutants are superior, then we also have humans who push for their own vision of the future. Charles is sort of in the middle, and he strives for equality between the two races. So really, he's fighting against two utopian ideas which he thinks can lead to a dystopian reality.
Yeah, but that in itself can be problematic because that means Charles is putting his utopia above everyone else's, thinking that it will be the most beneficial for everyone. And that's exactly what everyone else is doing. Though Charles's utopia might not be on the surface as dystopic as the others because he's trying to avoid segregation, inequality, racism, etc., there might still be negative effects, and he still has an image of the perfect world that can end up being corrupted or have other potentially negative consequences.
Yeah, but Charles' utopia is founded on equality, which he thinks can be accomplished by bringing the two groups, mutants and humans, together. For example, he tries to find common goals that can get them to work together and allow them to coexist in harmony. Magneto tells Charles at one point in X-Men First Class that he doesn't want to be part of a world in which he's not part of, which speaks to Charles' vision of inclusion. He really is pushing for mutants and humans to be on the same basis of humanity, is he not?
I see where you're going with that, and equality is hard to argue with, saying that it is a bad utopia to fight for. Perhaps the dystopic threats that arise from the goal is related to the identification of what makes them different, while simultaneously trying to bridge those differences and put them aside.
Right. I would not argue against having rights for everyone that are equal, but there are parts that are perhaps threatening, as you said. If equality is achieved, there might be another group that feels as if their rights were not up to par with the rest of the mutants and humans.
Yeah, plus the utopia of equality that he's fighting for might end up aiming at bringing people down to the same level, which might remove the ability to maintain and retain one's individuality while staying happy in society.
Right. That's a lot to think about, especially in a universe and that's so complex. But hopefully we gave you some more perspective on the different characters and their ideas of utopia and what they want for the future. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.